Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of Save World and Make Art. And welcome to your hosts. I am Eugene, and we have with us, drum roll please, the very incomparable, very down-to-earth, but yet also a really good cook. His name is Matt Faulkner.
Me. Oh, you're talking about me. You.
Yes, talking about you. I was at your house one day and you made me a giant breakfast that just wouldn't quit. And I learned that day how you just have taken to the kitchen.
Yeah.
Now, was that always something that you did, or is that something that you sort of took on later on in life?
I had to take it on after my divorce to my son's mom. Single, not a single dad for several years. Somebody's got to cook. So yeah, that's when I started. And you cook too.
I've been doing a lot of cooking lately, as of late. I have to say that the pandemic has been kind to me in the kitchen because it's freed me up a lot of time to investigate, what are we going to eat? I plan it out and then go shopping and, just make the meals. I enjoy it. Right now we have red lentil soup on the stove, just all veggies in there, a lot of garlic, some lemon juice, mixed in there. You got to balance out the acidity. It's delicious.
Wow. See, I mean, you're learning all of these things. Like when you said lemon juice in your soup, I was like, lemon juice, but you learn all of these flavor combinations when you just start messing with things, and you got to have the lemon juice in the lentil soup. You got to.
And what I try and do when I go out shopping is, you can't buy all the fresh herbs that you want because they would probably end up going bad if you're not cooking a ton. So I try to get at least one. Sometimes it'll be basil. Sometimes it'll be cilantro. Right now I'm getting parsley, and I feel like parsley is something that I can add to a lot of dishes, and it always complements the dish. So I put the fresh parsley in the soup as well. Sometimes I'll sneak in spinach. I know, the family never knows. I just chop it all up. It looks like the parsley because it's green, right? And I put parsley in there, but then you get a ton of spinach, and it's great. It's great. It's just another way for vitamins.
And your family doesn't know that you're doing this to them.
Well, not in the soup.
I'm tempted, Eugene. No family should have to be that healthy all the time. Okay.
Hey, speaking of healthy,
yeah,
I hear you found some healthy art that we could talk about today.
Yeah. Yes. And the hero that I brought forth today is a guy that I found. I think my teacher Glenn told me about him, and Glenn was a fine artist too. He wasn't an illustrator, but this guy was an illustrator. 1890s through 1922 was when he died. His name is Sydney Sime. Sydney Sime, S-I-M-E, and he was in, he was in Britain, but I think it was in Cornwall. That's right. And he was, as a child, he was stuck in the coal mines. That was his, and kids died all the time in those coal mines, just pushing those sacks of coal and dragging them up ladders and things. Yeah, getting, emphysema and tuberculosis and with the disease you get from inhaling coal dust and all of that crap. But then he got to where did the Beatles come from? What was that town in
Liverpool?
So he apparently there's a school of art there, and he went there, and he became very celebrated for a fantastic kind of imagery, a message that was. When I first saw him, I thought the guy must have done drugs, because there weren't a lot of other people there There now we have actually, I think we've talked about, or we will talk about Arthur Rackham. He was pretty out there, and Edmund Duloc, who was out there too. But this guy was even more out there than them. So I'm going to share the screen now, and
Okay.
we will look at Sir Sydney Sime. I don't think he's a sir, um, but I used to, when I used to tell the story, I said about him in my classes. Okay, so here he is. I'd say yes, he died of an opium addiction. I don't think he did. I don't know how he died. He was married. His widow gathered up all of his work, and they made a gallery and art, a museum that exists today. That's the Sydney Sime collection uh,
Wow.
in Britain somewhere in a little town. I would love to go there. This one, actually, I'm going to go over to his black and white work here for a second. So this one is really indicative of what I was attracted to by his work. First of all, it's the way he shoves stuff around on the picture plane. So you have these big chunks of light and these big chunks of dark, and the way he shoves the detail of this megalopolis up into the top section of the drawing brings my eye up there, and it makes me want to investigate that. He could have moved that down. I mean, the city, if it was me designing this, I might have made the city like fill up this much space. But he just said, I'm going to shove it all the way up in there, and then I'm going to put my little hero down in here on this griffin kind of thing that he's flying on. And so what it becomes is, tell me if you see this, the yin yang underlying design element of, you have all of this darkness with a little bit of light down there, and all of this light with these little dots of darkness up there. So it's that yin yang symbol, which is
Oh
the
yeah.
underline. Does that ring a bell for you, Eugene?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. It makes for such a nice contrast, um, directing your eye. There's definitely a good use of light and shadow, very dramatic. It it really reminds me of when you're thinking about black and white filmmaking from the early silent film days, how there might be these big looming shadows just based on the fact that the lighting then wasn't what the lighting is today.
Yeah.
But that's something that I can compare this to, and I just think that having the viewpoint or the vantage point, when you talk about your illustrations and you say, I'm pretending that there's a camera in a drone that I can move around. And how often do we get to see, especially back then, a vantage point from up
Right.
in the air looking down like that?
Right. So this is his mind's eye. And there's no drones then. There's no camera, there's no movies. This is this guy imagining this. And this is why his work was so celebrated, because it's so fantastic compared to and he's forgotten now. Nobody knows who Sidney Sime is. But that's the other thing too, is like, to me, this kind of image gets tossed into the collective imagery of a culture. And so even though movie makers now don't recognize him, at some point, I wouldn't be surprised if they had seen something by him. Um, Particularly the movie makers from the 1940s and 50s. They were children when his work was popular. So they could have seen it when they were 8 and not remembered it. Um, the one other thing I want to say too is like, the light that's being cast across the city here, the atmosphere that he's created by tossing the rest of it in the back, going into a shadow. It's as if a cloud has cast the shadow across here. And
Yeah.
like, what I'm talking about. Like, you go look at a city, you drive down the highway on the other side of the river from Manhattan, and you can see that, yeah, half of the city could be cast in shadow, and then the rest is in sunlight, and that is a tremendously dramatic look.
Yeah. So beautiful. So you think to yourself, this man had to have done some traveling to have this image. Like, you know, for me, I think of visiting Santorini, a little island in Greece, and those little whitewashed buildings that are on the cliff. It makes me think of something like this. So you wonder, where did he travel that influenced his visual imagery to want to do something like this?
Yeah, I hear that very much so. The other thing is, there's a possibility that he didn't travel.
Mm,
And that's one of the things that so much today, our work as creators is influenced by the movies that we've seen and that we've traveled. And that what he's talking about, I think, in his work is that he must have seen imagery, prints from, ancient Rome, Persia, and he probably did travel too. But one of the things I just want to keep on playing up here is that this is this guy's imagination.
yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Um,
Yes.
I think he probably did travel too. But the one other thing I want to say is, having been stuck in the mines when he was a kid, does this not tell about that fear of being stuck down in the caves digging coal out, and the Tommy knockers down there, the ghosts in the caves and all of that stuff?
Yeah. You can see it definitely presents a foreshadowing.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm sorry. I feel like I wasn't negating the fact that he might have traveled. I think that he probably did. But I want to keep on keeping that issue up of both, that he got
Yeah.
influences from traveling, but also this is bizarre stuff compared to what other people were making at the time.
Oh my gosh, it really is. And when you think about, um, you know, just the idea of literature and maybe some of the influence that just writing had on his imagination. But probably the biggest influence, at least when we're looking at this piece, would be his experience in the coal mines and how, most people, unless you're doing that as a job, you don't have an understanding of what it feels like to go beneath the earth's surface in
Yeah.
that way. And especially in these dark tunnels that just go on and just that feeling of the unknown. I think that promotes some of the way that maybe he thought when he was generating an imaginative world like this.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Let me show a couple other ones here. So also the stuff he was creating, I'm when you really need to look up his work, if you're seeing this, because this is really kind of tame compared to some of the creatures that he made. Opium was starting to be a big deal in Europe at this time. So when I see stuff like this by him, I'm like, this guy must have done some opium, because nobody was doing things like this. I mean, it must have been so bizarre for the Victorian era British to look at. Oh my goodness, um, poor Sydney. He's gone off the edge again. Um, and let me see what else we have here. His color work was kind of limited, although he did. They look more like woodblock prints. I think that these were watercolors, but um, yeah, to me they weren't as captivating as his black and white work. Um,
Yeah, there seems to be something about the way he uses the black and white where it really demonstrates his understanding of value, his understanding of the composition. Like, for example, in this piece, you really feel the rays of light coming through the clouds, shining upon this ship that's caught in a horrible storm, so much so that the waves are tossing it and the sea creatures all about. And for an artist to be able to capture a moment like that, especially with black and white, I think it's very strong, very captivating to the viewer's attention, and definitely puts us in the midst of this tumultuous feeling that you must feel when you're on a ship that feels like it at any moment it could completely flip over.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, again, it's the atmosphere, isn't it? I mean, you really get a feeling for this space by the way he's manipulated the values of the light and the dark. Also, I want to look at Eugene. Take a look at his mastery of drawing that boat. You ever try? Ever try to draw one of these ships to try to
Yeah,
get the
no,
ellipses just right?
yes. I think that when you look at the ship and you have the front of the ship with that beautiful carving, looks like a beak from a bird, and then the ship just curves away from us into the to the background and the distance, and you get that feeling of that forced perspective,
Yeah.
and then all of the other lines that are considered in terms of attaching to the sails. And also he had to have a knowledge, you would think, of sailing in order to pull something like this off.
Yeah. No, I mean, again, he couldn't look it up on Google to find some pictures, photographs of sailing ships in order to try to render that. Where did he get that kind of understanding? He must have been on a boat.
Yeah,
Um, Here's the other thing too. I mean, well, yeah, I just want to stick with that perspective too. To be able to, the command he had of drawing was like throwaway. You know,
yeah,
he just, yeah, yeah, oh yeah, I can do this. And you see somebody who's mastered this, uh, the ability to render things as they are, you know?
yeah, it's pretty spectacular. I can't even imagine at the time that this work was coming out, I can't imagine people's reaction to it, but it must have really stirred up the imagination of whoever came across this work. Did he have it published at all, or was it more work that was framed?
He did a lot of work for one guy, a British lord from Ireland. I think his name was Delaney. And publishing was different back then. One person with a lot of money could basically be your publisher.
Yeah.
And he would just say, I'm going to write a story and you make the pictures and we'll print up 5,000 of these or 1,000 and I'll give you 450 pounds. And that's enough to keep anybody, in sausages and ale for a year. And, and you draw whatever you want from my stories. Now, so that could be it. Like I
Yeah.
think he was not working with one of these traditional big publishers there, and there weren't that many back then. Here's one other of these throwaway things I just want to focus on. Let me get this over here. Just look at the design that he's done on the sail.
Mm,
it's it's
wow.
brilliant. And for me, I would be like, I gotta really make that shine because I'm so proud of this design that I've done on this sail. Everybody's got to know how good I am because I've done this, and I will render the crap out of this. But he's even put this in atmospheric perspective where the light is shining on it a bit, and it's further away from the picture plane, so it's lighter, and the ropes of the rigging are actually darker. So he's basically saying, yeah, I'm that good. I don't give a damn if you see how good I am, but that's how good I am. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I really like that. And it's interesting to see the contrast of the two creatures, the one that's carved into the boat and the one that's on the sail.
Right.
They're both bird-like. I feel like the one on the sail has a slight resemblance to maybe what we would call today Native American or Inuit. in
Yeah.
its simplicity.
Yeah, you're right. It has a totem pole kind of look to it. I forget what the native word for those are, but yeah, the black crow is really a big element in the Tinglet, I think, is the tribe out in Western Washington. Um, and but that's a different design than this bird that's been carved down here,
Yeah,
right? This looks
right.
more like European almost. And this, you're right, this looks Native American. So again, I mean, like, I brought this guy in, so obviously, I'm geeked by this guy, but even now as I'm looking at this, like, I could look at this for a while because holy crap, all of these little aspects to this say, here's a master that I can learn something from, you
Oh my
know?
gosh. So much so. And you do feel like that sail is full of wind, and the ship is shaking, and the waves are crashing all around, and then you have these sea creatures that are brought in that are obviously they're probably trying to get away from whatever horrible thing
Yeah.
is happening as well.
Um, yeah, and one thing I want to point out too is look at the design of the waves, the way that he's rendered the waves. This is not a Western European approach to drawing and painting waves at that time. Okay. Neither are the fish. When you look at these fish, they stand out because they don't look like the way a hopper or what's another guy who um, is
Well,
really who?
yeah, I was going to say, well, even Sargent, who we talked
Yeah,
about
yeah.
recently, we could use him as a
They
contrast.
they just wouldn't render a fish this way. So
Yeah.
that leads me to, and this is where my teacher Glenn, he would talk about the influence of the Japanese artwork that was coming from Japan at that time, starting in around the 1870s, when we were talking about this before. Commodore Perry, by gunship, opened up the port to Edo in Japan. The Japanese had blocked all Westerners for like a couple of hundred years from doing any kind of business in Japan, and American gunship diplomacy sent over a couple of Ironside type ships and said, well, yeah, um, do business with us or we'll blow stuff up. And that's an exaggeration, but it's not too far off, I think. But anyway, a lot of artwork came into Europe after that time, and so it's not a big jump to say, okay, this is because of the influence of Japanese art. And I'm going to don't do that. Okay, good. Let me So here's one Japanese print that from a guy who's pretty famous named Hokusai. You've seen his work before, and you can see
Yeah.
um, the nature of designing the waves. That's not Western. This is a
Right.
woodblock, but this is a culture that has not been infected by the way Western art wants to render things.
Right. And
And you remember we were
knowing a
talking.
little bit about Japanese culture and how you might encounter a Zen garden where the sand is raked into lines that might spiral, or the rake will present these lines in the sand that almost resemble water, so that the sand is supposed to, when you stare at a Zen garden, these large rocks that are central in the garden, those are supposed to represent islands, and then the sand is supposed to represent the water, so that you can kind of clear your head and meditate. And so when I look at the beautiful line quality, like you said, in the representation of something like water, it makes me think of the Japanese Zen
Yeah,
garden,
yeah,
and what that means to their culture.
yeah. Look too. You remember the first image we showed of Sime and how he squished that beautiful city up into the top. this is why I think too he was influenced by Japanese. Look how this village is squeezed, all of that life of that village is squeezed into the horizon line there. and
Yeah.
and there's a lot of people. It looks like there's people up on this bridge, and how much energy is represented in that, meaning um, the expression of that amount of life in that skinny little space. And that's a very Japanese woodcut kind of approach from this guy, but also from, I'm going to show this artist too. Did you want to say anything about that? I don't want to skip off.
Yeah, I agree with your comparison, and it's quite mind-boggling to think that these artists, uh, both the artist that you're showing us, and then of course Hokusai, who we're comparing him to, both artists were willing to push the limitations of how we perceive these things, which
Yes.
up till this point, we sort of read into it very literally as far as art goes,
Yes.
in depicting elements like this. So now all of a sudden you're given this chance as a viewer to see it and feel it in a quite different manner. And I think it probably pushed people's imagination even further into the realm of what was taking place in art at the time, which,
Yeah.
like you mentioned, a lot of the Impressionist artists a little bit later on were being influenced by this work.
Yeah.
So, and that translates into, the work that comes after it. Like I'm thinking about um, Dolly and some of what Dolly brings to the whole notion of exaggeration and also imagination. And you would think that, for that style of work, some of this had to come into play.
Yeah. Absolutely. And you can see the connection. So without being trite, we're all connected. That you can't deny that what we do today isn't influenced by this too. One other thing, and wow, we've gone way over time. Him going from light to absolute darkness in the sky blows me away.
Yeah.
I mean, that, like, who would do that? That's like, but it has a truth to it.
It does, because there are moments where we do see the sky look like this, but I think because we have this idealized version of what a sky is supposed to look like, we tend to not portray it this way. So I think that's a really nice use of the value, bringing it
Yeah.
up from the top of the picture plane, and that it's almost like a shroud of darkness is starting to
Yeah.
bring itself across the sky before the sun sets.
Yeah. It's like a storm cloud maybe, or just yeah, a sunset. And it is also played up by his I don't want to say anything inappropriate, like what the actual word is for this. I forget what it is, but this is his signature, I believe. And it may be talking about the nature of the print or where it is and that sort of thing, what he's pictured. This is from a series of Mount Fuji. He did a series
Ah,
of different views of Mount Fuji from all over Japan.
oh wow.
So, but just the white against the black there from this, it's just, it tickles me. And lastly, I'll show you this guy. This is another guy named Hiroshige. Uh, just the beauty of the design of these homes. Um, this stuff going on over here. It's just fascinating to me. And so, yeah, I definitely see, okay, there's got to be a connection, right?
I
I
think
mean,
you've made uh, a great argument for our lead artist today, and his imagination being stirred by what quite possibly could be this work from Asia that was infiltrating, and rightfully so. It's kind of like the Asian art version of the British invasion back in the 60s
Yeah.
for rock and roll,
Yeah.
and just how immensely influential that those woodblock prints really were.
Right. So this is Sydney Sime, right? And we've also talked about Hokusai and Hiroshige. So I'll text you those so we can put that in the blurb, okay, Eugene? And
All right.
definitely look this guy up. And I'm gonna bring back, I don't know if you, but definitely more of Hokusai's work and
Yeah.
right? 'Cause
Yeah,
those
and
girls-
maybe tie in some of that work into some of the other artists that we brought up as far as the Impressionists are concerned.
Yeah. All right. How
All
you
right.
doing? You good?
That
I'm
sounds great. Thank you, everybody. We appreciate you guys joining us today for Save World Make Art. And
Mm-hmm.
Matt, do you want to sing us out today with a little bit of your favorite sitcom song?
I don't.
La
You
da
know,
da 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 da.
Arizona banana. Boy, boy, the
La
way
la
they
la la la.
played, boys were boys and men, girls were girls. I don't know. It was from what was that show? Archie Bunker or and his son-in-law Meathead. Oh, that was a
Well,
horrible show. And yeah, not a nice guy. Anyways, but you're a nice guy, Eugene. And I think I'm
you're a nice
okay.
guy, Mr. Faulkner. And thanks for sharing us, Sydney Sime.
Sydney Sime. We'll be back
Sydney
next week.
Sime. I love it.
We'll
And
put
it's a great
together a
artist.
schedule for next month.
Yeah, we're going to be working on putting together another class.
Yep.
We still have one more weekend of our current class. So come join us to learn about drawing if you choose.
Yeah. Awesome. All right,
All
Eugene.
right. Well, I am Eugene Clark. That is Mr. Matt Faulkner.
That's me.
And we want to say, have a great day. Keep making art out there, everybody.
Peace.
Bye-bye.
Boy.